Everybody's talking about it. It's literally one of the hottest topics going on right now. The real estate market crash of 2022. What's up, everybody? My name is Joey Guest, and I'm a real estate agent right here on the Space Coast in beautiful, sunny Central Florida. And today we're going to talk about one of the hottest topics that we can't get away from. No matter where you turn, everybody seems to be talking about it. And that's the real estate market crash of 2022. And let me be upfront. I'm not here to tell you how great the real estate market is just because I'm a real estate agent. We're going to look at some hard data and indicators that people that are a heck of a lot smarter than me look at when they're trying to predict market cycles and determine when the next market corrections are coming. All right, full disclosure. I thought the last market shift was coming in 2020 when all the lockdowns started. I thought that was it. I said, this is the peak of the market that everybody's been talking about that's going to start cycling the other direction. Now is when the downturn is going to start. And man, I was completely wrong. I'll admit it. I fully didn't see things going the way that they have. And here we are 2 years later. I mean, record low inventory, prices and home values are just rising at extremely rapid rates. We're seeing all types of crazy and creative terms that buyers are using in order to get properties under contract and close on them. I mean, there's no way that this is sustainable, right? Okay, so this is what we're gonna look at. There was a recent article written in Fortune by Sean Tully where he interviews Ed Pinto. Now, I'm not going to go into too many details. I'm sure you guys have already seen tons of videos on this article. You've probably even read the article yourself. But the bottom line is we're going to look at some of these indicators that Ed Pinto uses to, I guess, predict market cycles. And there's some of the same indicators he used to predict the last market crash. And it's really interesting because this isn't a perspective that I hear all that often. And that indicator is called the price to rent ratio. And essentially all that does is establish whether it's cheaper to rent a house or own a home. The lower the number indicates whether it's more favorable to buy, or the higher the number indicates that it may be more favorable to rent. Okay, depending on the source that you look at, you'll get a slight difference in information on where these numbers on the scale should fall. But essentially the common pattern that you'll notice is numbers between 1 and 15 indicate that it's better to buy. Numbers between, say, 16 to 20 indicate that it may be more favorable to rent depending on your personal circumstances and your market conditions. And then really anything that's 21 or above indicates that it's typically more favorable to rent a home. Okay, so if we go back and we look pre-2008 crash, certain markets had indicators around like 25, 27, even high as 30, meaning that it's much more favorable to rent. And because supply and demand was a bit different, which we'll get into here in a minute, home values or prices were up here and the cost of renting the same home was here compared to a comparable mortgage payment carrying cost. So essentially, when everyone realized, hey, I can go rent this same house for much less, I'm going to do that, prices weren't sustainable, the bubble popped, and home values fell. Now, there was a lot of other factors going on at that time that caused even rent prices to drop significantly, and naturally, that made home values fall as well, from my basic view. Okay, so don't take my word from it. Let's read exactly Ed Pinto's words on how he described how this indicator typically works. He said, but the overriding force governing home prices is rents. People won't pay much more per month to buy a house as to lease one that's extremely similar or to rent a nearby apartment offering the same space. So again, let's look at those numbers. If your mortgage payment and carrying costs on a home are $4,000 a month, and there's 24 homes you could rent that are comparable for, say, $2,500 a month, a lot of people are just going to go rent that home because they don't have the same maintenance, they don't have the same worry, and it's significantly cheaper. Also in that article, Ed goes on to indicate that our previous market bubble was really driven by speculation, whereas now we're in a market that's really fueled by demand, meaning low supply, high demand. And we're actually going to do some live examples in a little bit, so make sure you stick around because we're going to look at really cost of ownership and cost of rent in certain markets so we can actually see what the indicators look like here and how big the bubble actually is, and that may give us an idea when it's going to pop. So let's do this. If you agree on this assessment that right now this market is fueled by demand, why don't you hit the like button and let us know? And if you disagree and you think this is purely speculation, let us know in the comments below. And in fact, if you've got a completely different opinion, comment below, let us know what that is. All right, so the first indicator we're gonna look at now is rents. Since supposedly if rents are what is propping up home values, let's start with rents and see what those look like. So nationwide, rents have gone up over 15% since last year, and they've also moved up in parallel with home values. So as more people are starting to get priced out of the home buying market, that's actually gonna put more pressure on the rental market. And everybody's talking about interest rates right now, which we'll talk about in a minute. Okay, so in theory, if the rental market and rental rates are propping up home values and home prices right now, and there's more buyers that are getting priced out of the home market, that's in theory gonna put more pressure on the rental market. So in speaking of home prices, the 2021 Case-Shiller Housing Price Index rose 18.8%. So what does that mean? That's causing FOMO. Everybody's afraid of missing out. They're either afraid that prices are gonna keep rising, and so they're trying to just lock in a home at somewhat of a reasonable value now, or what they think is going to be reasonable. And people are worried about interest rates rising. The Fed has already announced that interest rates are going to go up this year. They've already started to increase. And we're so used to seeing these historically low interest rates of 3, even 4%. And now we're seeing rates of maybe 5 to 6, which are still great rates historically. But we've been so fortunate to have these extremely low rates that even these quote unquote higher rates that are still low are making people jump into homes now. So FOMO is the other big thing that's driving this market. So rising interest rates and higher home values are two conditions that would normally start to cool a market. But right now nationwide, it's still considered red hot, and especially right here in Central Florida, things are still on fire. So stack that on top of the FOMO of these higher interest rates coming and even rising rents. People are afraid that if they don't buy a house now, they're not going to be able to afford to buy a house if they continue to rent because of the rate that rental rates are going up as well. And many buyers who may have passed on homes previously that they thought were going to be too expensive have seen these homes become even more expensive, which is increasing that FOMO even more, that if they don't go ahead and just get in the market and lock in something, that they're not going to be able to afford anything at all in the near future. So it's no secret that Florida has seen prices climb, and we're continuing to see prices climb a lot faster and a lot more when compared to other parts of the country. And a big driver behind that is our population, both driven by migration and the increasing birth rate in Florida. So what do we have to credit for that? Well, obviously, Florida stayed open pretty much the majority of the pandemic, which makes it an extremely desirable place to live. Aside from the traditional factors, you know, we've got, in my opinion, some of the best weather in the country. We've got the beaches, we've got beautiful lakes, and of course there's all the theme parks if that's something that you're into. But let's look at job growth. Florida has gained over 497,000 jobs since March of 2021. So aside from Florida being a desirable place to live, the growing job market is bringing people to the state. So when we look at the demand compared to our inventory, our Q1 2022 inventory statewide averaged around 1 month's worth of inventory. So growing population and low inventory is not a good mix. And so traditionally, this is where we may look to the builders and developers to bring more inventory to the market. Well, while they're doing that, they're not keeping up with the pace of demand because of supply chain and labor shortages. Add on top of that a lot of them aren't even releasing inventory until it's 75 to maybe 90% complete. So traditionally, where you'd be able to walk into a home builder, secure a home under contract, and know that in 7 to 8 months you would have your home, well, that's not an option anymore. So that's putting even more pressure on the resale market. Plus, certain communities are giving away lots on a lottery system, so you're not even guaranteed to get a lot. And we're seeing non-refundable escrow deposit requirements from builders, highest and best offers. So that's not the same option that it used to be. So it's not relieving the same amount of pressure on the market that we would hope it would. Now here's one indicator that I do think is interesting, and I don't have hard data and statistics to show you, but I can say just from being in the market and seeing these things real time, we are starting to see days on market and contract fall throughs increase, which may be an indicator that things are going to start cooling off. So if that's where you think this market's headed to, if you think it's starting to cool off, hit the like button. If you think it's actually heating up or it's still red hot, drop that in the comments. All right, so enough of all these hypotheticals and guessing. Let's look at some real live examples. I mean, that's why you're here. We're gonna look at price to rent indexes in some actual submarkets in Central Florida and on the Space Coast to see what rents are and what home prices are. And then we're also gonna look at inventory as well, so you guys can make a determination on where you think this market is. All right, so let's get into some price to rent ratios. We're gonna start off on the east side of Orlando in Lake Nona, so we can get a look at what the east side of Central Florida is doing. Then we're gonna move over to Winter Garden on the west side. Then we're gonna pop further east to the Space Coast and look at two different areas on the Space Coast as well, so you can get an overall idea of what's happening in Central Florida. Okay, so the first place we're gonna look is in Lake Nona, primarily because it's newer construction, planned development, so it's usually easier for us to compare properties that are for sale with similar properties that are available for rent. Okay, so on the map right here, you can see we're looking at the Eagle Creek Village Walk part of Lake Nona, and let's start off in Eagle Creek. So I've got a 5-bedroom house for $725, $799, $735. So for the sake of this example, let's use $750 as our home value. And then in the same neighborhood, we pretty much found two 4-bedroom houses. This first one is $4,200 a month. The second is $4,000 a month. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use $750,000 for our home price and $4,000 a month for our rent, which brings us to a price to rent ratio of 15.6. So we'll get back to what these numbers mean here in a little bit, but for this example in Lake Nona, we're at like a 15.6 price to rent ratio. Let's move over to Winter Garden now and see what kind of numbers we have there. Okay, so in Winter Garden, we're gonna start off looking at the Horizons West to Hamlin district, and you can see there's a lot more inventory for sale, which is the screen we're looking at here in Winter Garden. So to make this a little bit easier, let's look at where our available rental inventory is and kind of work from there. So you can see right here in this pocket, we've got a handful of properties available for rent from $3,000, $3,200, $2,400, $3,100, $3,200. Okay, so we've got our numbers here, $725 price, $3,100 for rent, and that's actually gonna go a lot higher to 19.4. So as you can see in this example, it was a little bit skewed because we had actually less inventory for sale in that particular part of Horizons West when we compared it to the rental inventory. Now granted, we are looking at some really specific micro markets, but it just gives you an idea of kind of what's going on as a whole if you were looking to buy something or rent something in an area. All right, so now let's head all the way east over to the Space Coast, and we're gonna look at Viera. Viera is a planned community, lots of new or newer construction, and we're gonna see what we can get for sale versus rents. So on our screen here, you can see we've got a handful of homes that are for sale in Viera West and Viera East. But when we look at our rental map here, you can see that rentals in the Viera area are few and far between. I've got a total of 5 right here on my screen. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna focus on this right here because we know we've got a few properties for sale that are in the area. So $4,500 a month is going to be our rent number. And for our home price, let's see, we've got a $584, that's a smaller home. A $699, that's a little bit closer. So we're gonna use $700,000 as our price and $4,500 is going to be our rent. All right, so we've got our values entered, $700,000 for our price, $4,500 for our rent, and that's a 12.9, so that's a 13. So that's actually indicating that it's better to buy in Viera than it is to rent. And the biggest thing that I notice aside from this number is the inventory number. There's very limited opportunities to rent when we compare properties for sale. You saw Lake Nona was pretty balanced. Winter Garden was, I would say it was kind of balanced, maybe more on the for sale side, depending on the neighborhood and the sub community within Winter Garden that you were looking for. So for our last example, we're gonna head further south in the county down to Palm Bay because there's tons of new construction going on in Palm Bay, and it's really one of the most affordable markets really in all of Central Florida and the Space Coast. So I know a lot of people are moving there due to proximity to the coast, to the Cape, and the affordability. Okay, so we've got our maps up in Palm Bay, and we're gonna be really focused in on the northwest section of Palm Bay because you can see we've got quite a bit of inventory for sale on our map to the left, and there's quite a bit of inventory available for rent on our map to the right. So down here we've got a 350, a 420, a 370, and then for rent in the same general area we have a 2200, 1600, 22, 23, 22, 24. So let's use 375 for our sale number and 2200 for our rent number. Okay, so we've got our 375 sale number and 2200 rent number, and that's gonna give us a 14.2. Okay, we could have gone way deeper and gotten much more analytical on all that data, but what it did do is it gave us a real live perspective on what's happening in our market. So national and city price to rent ratios rise and fall depending on the state of the real estate market. And in the years leading up to the crash, that national number rose to 22.5 to like 24.5 right before the crash. And after the real estate market turned, home prices went down and rent started to going up, which eventually made that ratio go down, and it finally dipped back below 20% in 2011 for the entire United States. As of 2021, that national number was 18.27, and as you just saw in our analytics, that number seems to be consistent with what we were seeing in Central Florida, if not a little bit lower. So if you still think that this market is driven and being propped up by the rents, hit the like. If you think it's all speculative and you think it's all gonna pop and this bubble's just gonna blow up, let us know in the comments below. Now obviously if you're trying to get some real live information on your market or how that's gonna affect the sale or purchase of your next home, please call or text us and we will give you a much more in-depth formal analysis. The numbers in the comments down below. You can email us as well. You can find that down in the description. And if you thought this was helpful, make sure you subscribe to the channel and watch this video next. We'll see you next time.